Our Old Testament lesson today is going to be the same passage that I read last Sunday. It's Isaiah 42, and again, verses 1 through 9. Listen again for the word of the Lord. But here is my servant, the one I uphold, my chosen, who brings me delight. I've put my spirit upon him. He will bring justice to the nations. He won't cry out or shout aloud or make his voice heard in public. He won't break a bruised reed. He won't extinguish a faint wick, but he will surely bring justice. He won't be extinguished or broken until he has established justice in the land. The coastlands await his teaching. God the Lord says, the one who created the heavens, the one who stretched them out, the one who spread out the earth and its offspring, the one who gave breath to its people and life to those who walk on it. I, the Lord, have called you for a good reason. I will grasp your hand and guard you and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the nations, to open blind eyes, to lead the prisoners from prison, and those who sit in darkness from the dungeon. I am the Lord. That is my name. I don't hand out my glory to others or praise to idols. The things announced in the past, look, they've already happened. But I'm declaring new things. Before they even appear, I tell you about them. This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. If loved by God is what we are, then how are we going to be? And what are we going to do? If loved by God is what we are, then how are we going to be, and what are we going to do? These are the questions for this day. These are the questions Isaiah 42 continues to shed light on. Last week, I preached about coming to terms with our own belovedness and how that is essential before we ever do anything for God. That it is absolutely crucial that we meditate and reflect on the fact that we delight God apart from anything that we accomplish. This is where we begin. But today, church, is for remembering that we do move from that place, right? The acceptance of how loved we are is the very thing that gives us what we need to do God's work in the world, right? The acceptance of how loved we are is the very thing that gives us what we need to do God's work in the world. So if loved by God is what we are, then how are we going to be? And what are we going to do? I put my spirit upon them. They will bring justice to the nations. They won't cry out or shout aloud or make their voice heard in public. They won't break a bruised reed. They won't extinguish a faint wick, but they will surely bring justice. I changed the pronouns to they to kind of include us. That's the idea today, because as I said last week, Isaiah is giving us a description of God's servants, people of God. This is how people of God are. And this is what they do. They won't be extinguished or broken until they have established justice in the land. I, the Lord, have called you for a good reason. I will grasp your hand and guard you and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the nations, to open blind eyes, to lead prisoners from prison and those who sit in darkness from the dungeon. This is who people of God are. This is what people of God do. So if we break that down a little bit, people of God are not aggressive. They are patient, nonviolent, merciful, showing tender care to the most vulnerable among us. I put this verse on the screen because it's poetic and it's beautiful, number one, right? He won't break a bruised reed, won't extinguish a faint wick, but he will surely bring justice. I love how one preacher put it like this: true leadership protects what is weak until it's strong enough to stand, and keeps gentle hands cupped around a weak flame until it can burn again. God's people are not forceful or domineering. Rather, they show real strength through gentleness and guarding the most feeble and fragile among us. If love is what we are, then how are we going to be in the world? I don't know why you come here every week. I don't know why we keep coming back to this place called church, this sanctuary, to this thing called the Bible, to this God we know in Jesus, if not for it to change something, right? We want it to change something. Like if it has no effect, if it doesn't matter, then why are we here, right? You're going to hear this sermon today. You're going to go home and you're going to hear 100,000 messages. In between now and when I see you next, they're going to completely disagree with everything these verses say. I mean, honestly, I don't stand a chance. If loved by God is what we are, then how are we going to be? They won't break a bruised reed. They won't extinguish a faint wick, but they will surely bring justice. People of God, gather around the ones who feel weak and weary, the ones whose flame has started to flicker. People of God are people who huddle close in times like that and guard the spark that's left until it can burn strong again. People of God are not the kind of people who say, "No one stood by me when my flame was going out. Figure it out on your own." People of God are not the kind of people who say, "When I was bruised, I had to keep going. So should you." People of God won't break. People of God won't break a bruised reed. They won't extinguish a faint wick, but they will surely bring justice. If people are of God, that is, if we live in God's love, if we have been changed by God's love, if grace and abundance and life are the things that rule in our heart, then people of God are different. They act differently. They respond differently than the world would respond. They give differently than the world would give. They understand better than the world would understand. They're not violent or forceful or cold. They're gentle and merciful. They don't overpower the weak. They guard them like hands cupped around a weak flame until it can burn again. I do think it's useful to remember that this portrait is a portrait of leadership for anyone called by God. The prophet is identifying servants of God, whoever they may be, and that's kind of you, and it's kind of me. And I wear a robe and you don't. And I have a microphone and you don't. And I realize that you are tempted, many of you, because I know y'all, many of you are tempted to count yourself out of this. And you say, I'm not a leader, I'm just a regular person. Or I'm not a leader, I kind of prefer to be in the background, as if the only kinds of leaders are spokespeople. You know that's not right. Some of us are tempted to say, I'm not a servant of God. My life just isn't that important. And I mean, I say that to say I hear stuff like this or some version of this frequently. People who are just very quick to count themselves out of significance and calling, right? I bet most of you in this room are baptized. Are you? Not? See a lot of heads nodding. Yeah. Yeah. Remember how we talked about that's kind of for everybody? Our gospel reading today is John the Baptist, and then Jesus gathering up his followers in the Gospel of John. And if you notice, Jesus didn't go down to the local university and ask for the best and brightest, most promising students to join his movement. Jesus didn't convene a meeting of the most successful Fortune 500 CEOs of his day and recruit a handful of them for his movement. Jesus didn't even start at the local synagogue with the religious professionals and insiders to start his movement. Jesus went out into the middle of nowhere, into a small town out in the wilderness. And he called a bunch of regular, everyday, ordinary people who had very average jobs, and he said, "Follow me. Follow me." And his message was very simple. Jesus said, it's time for you to change your heart. It's time for you to change your life. Why? Because God's kingdom is now. It's among us. It's happening. And the calling, and he said, I'm not leaving you alone on this. The calling is that if you do follow me, and you trust in my ways, and you do what I do, even if you think it's a load of crap, if you just give it a try, Jesus said, I promise you this, God's kingdom will come more fully and more fully and more fully. The calling is to live like it's here. And that means that God's people are different. It means that our rules are different. It doesn't mean that we ignore all the rules out there. That's not what it means. But it means that we live by a higher law. When everybody out there says, you don't deserve this, God's people say, we're tender and we're merciful. And God's people guard the weak and work to bring people out of their darkness, out of their dungeon. God's people bring justice. And then the second part of this, and I love this part, this is important. They won't be extinguished or broken until they have established justice in the land. They won't be extinguished. They won't be broken until. I'll never forget my professor, my mentor, truly my inspiration in ministry and in life, the one who died about 1.5 years ago. Her name was Dr. Cannon. You've heard me mention her before. She would tell us all the time. She would say, listen. People are not going to jump up and down and yell, Hercules, Hercules, the doers of justice have arrived. Get out now if you think that's the welcome you're going to get, right? No. She reminded us that the work is hard. The victories are few and far between. The opposition is fierce, and we will burn out fast if we are relying on our own strength. Our willpower and our abilities as a church will not carry us very far. I think y'all know that. I think you buy into that. We'll burn out fast if we do not develop a deep, deep spiritual well from which to draw when things get hard. And I think That's what this part is about in Isaiah. They won't be extinguished or broken until they have established justice in the land. Friends, we are baptized, we are loved, we are claimed, and we are called by God, but that is not where we stay. We have work to do. So if loved is what we are, if loved is what we are, then how will we be? And what will we do? If you're like me, I imagine you know of people whose wicks are faint right now. It might be you. It might be me. You know of people whose wicks are faint. Someone near you, your family. You know of someone who is bruised. We know people whose eyes are blind. We know people who are in prison. And it might be physical and it might not be. There's a whole lot of people who are in bondage in body, mind, or soul. We know people who sit in darkness. People who need to be brought out of dungeons. Right? We know people who are longing for light. Friends, people of God are people who are moved by pain and brokenness. And people of God are people who do not sit idly by. People of God are people who won't be extinguished or broken until they have established justice in the land, until everybody is free, until all the chains are broken and every dungeon demolished. People of God are people who won't be extinguished or broken until everybody's eyes are open wide, until every child walks in the light. People of God are people who won't be extinguished or broken until every bruised reed is healed and dances free, until every faint wick is strong and every flame burns bright again. May it be so.